Okay, I'll open this meeting of the City of Kerrville Planning and Zoning Commission at 4:31. Dorothy, would you call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Bob Waller,
Here.
Garrett Harmon, Tricia Byram,
Here.
David Jones,
Here.
Rustin Zuber,
Here.
Jim Brown,
Here.
Bill Morgan.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Visitors, citizens forum, anybody wishing to speak to this forum is encouraged to briefly speak. You need to fill out a speaker request form. And if you did, I have one, but you can speak maybe at the applicable time on the agenda. You're limited to 3 minutes, first 10 speakers. The consent agenda, any items listed below on the consent agenda are considered routine or ministerial in nature, being enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item or items will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Item 2A, approval of the minutes from the November 1st, 2018 meeting, starts on page 3. If there are no comments or changes that need to be made, I'll accept a motion.
I'll make a motion, we accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Passes 5-0. Item number 3 is a public hearing for consideration and action. 3A, Drew.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a public hearing, consideration, and action for a zoning change from Gateway District to a planned district development on approximately 4.27 acres of land out of the Patrick Fleming Survey number 666, abstract 145, and the City of Kerrville, Kerr County, more commonly known as 318 Leslie Drive. This change is a request for a planned development district with the following uses of professional office, retail, trade 1, and warehousing and distribution. And they're looking again for the professional office, retail trade, and sorry, warehousing distribution is not highlighted, but that last one on the list there. Here's the site plan for you. As you can see, this is a multiple phase project. The first phase on the top right of your site plan there is the retail warehouse and distribution facility. They will be accommodating for some truck docks within the property. Phase 2 is kind of that surrounding L shape of some office buildings. Here's some photographs of the property and Leslie Street. Here's some photographs of the adjacent area. With regard to the comprehensive land use plan, the current land use plan actually recommends this area and the surrounding area for single family or low density residential. It's currently zoned gateway along with all of the neighbors on called the northeast side of Leslie Drive. As you can see on this map, it's all zoned gateway. Across Leslie Drive is the residential mixed district, which allows for a mixture of different residential type businesses, or excuse me, residential types to be built. There are some manufactured homes, some single-family homes on the southwest side of Leslie. The new comprehensive plan 2050 looked at the catalyst areas as the primary focus, and the catalyst area nearby would have been the intersection of I-10, Highway 16, and Loop 534, primarily focusing on that intersection. The original Gateway District was expanded beyond that catalyst area to Leslie, carries further down Sidney Baker for about 1/8 to 1/4 mile, down to about Peterson Middle School. So the Gateway zoning district was much larger than the catalyst area that the Kerrville 2050 plan looked at. Outside of that catalyst area the future land use plan looked at the previous plan from 2002, which is where this property was designated as low-density residential. There has not been a specific small area study on this block along Leslie and Easy Street. As you can see, or as you're maybe familiar, there's multiple different uses. Let me get back to that first aerial. Oh, excuse me, the other one's larger. There's quite a variety of uses, from mini warehouse, mobile home park, limousine service, plumbing business. There are some residential uses on the southwest side in that RM district. A septic tank service company, and then backing up to the PD for Lowe's Home Improvement. The current requested use does not meet the gateway zoning. I think given the location, the current requested use is compatible with the adjacent area, although it is not compatible with the comprehensive plan as low-density residential. Neither is the current zoning, and neither are most of the adjacent land uses on the the northeast side of Leslie Drive. With that, from a policy standpoint, staff would recommend against the case. Given the actual area of this property and the adjacent land uses, staff recommends for the case for your consideration. I'd be pleased to answer any questions now or after the public hearing.
My question, Gateway to me is something coming up I-10, coming down Sidney Baker, or 27 east or west, or south 16. This is property you can't see from what I call the gateway.
Right.
And the gateway, the only reason I think this would be gateway is you'd be looking from I-10 up to the property, which I think you can see from I-10. But you already have commercial type businesses on that same view.
Correct. And I forgot to mention, through the Kerrville 2050 implementation plan, we are also under review of our entire zoning code.
Right.
With the Code Review Committee. That committee is looking at how our zoning districts lay out across the city, how our zoning districts comply with the Kerrville 2050 comprehensive plan. So we're in the middle of significant rewrite on our development codes and ordinances. I'm not familiar with how the Gateway District was originally laid out, whenever that was put into place following the 2002 comprehensive plan. Where those dividing lines were established, I'm not familiar with. The Gateway intention is for that focus, like the catalyst area on the Kerrville 2050 plan. But the Kerrville 2050 plan put a more focus on the actual intersection, the actual gateway, like you described, Mr. Waller, and less about the surrounding areas, leaving the surrounding areas more to their existing uses, because most of it is primarily developed, except for right around that gateway. I think it's a good infill project for the area. Again, we do have quite a variation of uses. I mean, just within the 200 feet immediately around it, much less if you step back to 1,000 feet around it, we've got a significant mixture of uses. It is a distribution type project. The applicant will go into a little more detail as far as the type of traffic that they expect for their project, both the office use and the distribution.
Okay.
One of the goals as staff, the consultant, and the code review committee, one of the goals that we've talked about is taking some of the planned district development, such as this, zone cases, and trying to incorporate those into the future zoning codes, the future zoning districts. As an example, with this being one or two uses, how would this and Lowe's and some of the other properties currently existing fit into the new code to try to eliminate as many grandfathered uses as possible? We certainly don't want to implement a new zoning district that has the entire neighborhood or the entire area as grandfathered uses to be redeveloped into something else. That is not the intention of the Code Review Committee nor staff and consultant. So when we look at rewriting some of the districts for this area, this case and the adjacent land uses will be taken into account as the existing use to try and find the best fit.
There is currently no abeyance in place to prevent us from looking at a change like this?
No, there's not.
Okay.
We've not put any moratorium on zone cases, certainly no moratorium on permits as we're moving forward with the code review. So we are kind of in this gap of no man's land between the new comprehensive plan and what we talked about, the emphasis on redevelopment and infill projects, and a rewrite of the zoning code to make sure it fits the intention of the comprehensive plan. Talking with the applicant, we talked about possibly pushing this project out until the new code was adopted. They indicated that that would be beyond their scope and time of the project, waiting for another 4 to 6 months before they start. That's why they filed the case as early as they did.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go ahead and open a public hearing at 4:42. Anybody wishing to talk to the commission, please step up to the podium. Give us your name and address, please.
And Chairman, one of the adjacent property owners, Mr. Nolan, wanted to pass those out. Did not wish to speak, but wanted to have his comments in writing to the commission.
Just for us to review.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Mary Olden, and I live at 2016 Easy Street here in Kerrville. And my property is one of the two properties that abut the 316 or 318 Leslie Drive property for which this meeting has been set. I've been living at 2016 Easy Street for 48 years and have seen an awful lot of changes in the area in that period of time. It was the country when I moved out there, and a lot of building has been constructed since then. I'm not here to protest anything. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to understand or hear most of what you had to say, so I'm a little lost, but I would like some help in being, and someone distinguishing for me what types of property are permitted in the Gateway District as compared to the planned development districts. I have Space Saver Storage, which is right on Loop 534. It's the back side of my property. I also own Hill Country Limousine Service, and several of our cars are parked in my backyard under carports. I have a few vans that aren't. And that's commercial property as far as I understand it, like the word commercial. We have the nursing home, we have the rehab house, we have Mr. Turner's property, the mobile home park. All of that has gone in since I've moved there. My main concern is my privacy and the value of my property, and because I have concerns about additional mobile home parks, low-income housing, I really would not like to see that come back into our area anymore. Because I've had personally, I live up on Easy Street at the end right next to Lowe's, and our street is a dead-end street. People don't seem to be able to read dead end. They love to come up there, and we have young people who come up and hang around up there. I've had to have the police come and remove them. Some of the house, well, we are concerned about my property is fenced, and I feel fairly safe, but Mr. Nolan's is not, and he has to have his son living there to keep people from breaking into his property. As a 48-year resident with small, noiseless commercial storage business, and it is noiseless, I am concerned about what might go into this 4.2.17 acres warehouse. What type of a warehouse is it? Are they light trucks or heavy, or we have to put up with Lowe's, and that's horrible. That's night and day, 24 hours a day. There's all kinds of noise from Lowe's. I know the city has to progress, but I just ask that my safety and my property values be considered along with the boroughs and any of the others. We're really the only two, I think, who own property with residences on them. The rest of Mr. Nolan, he owns the property but his is for commercial purposes only. I guess that's all I have to say. And if you can distinguish for me the differences between the planned, what do you call this, project planning, this, and the gateway, what is the difference between?
Drew, is that something you could address?
Yes. The Gateway zoning district allows for quite a number of commercial uses. The planned district development, they're specifically asking for the warehousing and distribution, professional office, and retail trade limited, or retail trade one, which allows for the retail portion of their warehouse and distribution. So it's actually a smaller list of uses that they're asking for than.
That's what the plan,
Correct.
the PDD is, okay.
The
I can't
gateway
even-
does not allow for the warehouse and distribution, and that's why they've made the request.
Well, I would think that warehousing and distribution would be outside of the city limits, more in the ETJ, rather than any area that might have homes, have any residential. I don't understand why it can be considered in that area, and I can't even imagine having a retail store in the middle of Leslie Drive.
Right, and their retail, and I'll let the applicant explain a little further, but their retail is pretty limited and primarily more of a delivery. That's the distribution side of the warehousing. So it's not your typical retail store with customers coming to the store.
Well, I guess my main concern is Easy Street for one, and my drivers having to come up to my property to get their cars for a job, and how much added traffic is going to be coming up Leslie Drive and Easy Street. Is it going to impede and cause us some problems for our drivers getting in and out? Because Easy Streets and Leslie Drive are the only ways that cars can
Right.
get in and out. I have access to the loop for space saver storage, but we don't use that from my property.
Okay.
It's too difficult, but that would be another problem. I had an incident about a month ago. My sister and I were leaving the property. This is one of my safety concerns. It's all of this extra. Then my sister and I were leaving, and there was a tow truck outside my gate that kept me from leaving because it was moving a car that apparently had been abandoned or something, I don't know. There was a police officer there. I tried to find out what the problem was, and he just told me the matter had been taken care of and brushed it off. That still concerned me. I couldn't get any more answers than that. I've had young people come up and they sit at the end of the street on the barrier and sit for hours, and I don't know what they're doing up there, and they have no, I know it's a public street. We've tried to get the city even to abandon it in the past, but they wouldn't do that for us either. But it shouldn't be where all these people come up and down willy-nilly, and that I just would like to know what this new distribution center is going, what kind of traffic it's going to bring to us, and anything you can do to help me would be greatly appreciated.
Well,
Making
thank
any
you
sense,
for your
I'm sorry.
comments.
No.
I'm sorry.
Bob.
I said thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Excuse me, ma'am?
Yes.
Is Ms. Nolan?
Yes.
Yes.
Olden.
Could you?
Olden.
Holden.
Forgive me. Could you outline, or Drew, could you show us what what exactly is your property, please?
My property is right here. This is my house.
No,
This is the storage
it's
unit.
east of, kind of northeast.
It's behind.
This property
Yeah.
here.
Right.
So the house is roughly where
Right,
the cursor's
yep.
there. There's the storage, mini storage.
And the
Right.
storage unit.
And then it goes up to the Loop 534 and the Lowe's property line.
And it butts the Lowe's property on that side.
And the only access is through your keypad gate there on Easy Street?
That, to my home, yes.
Okay.
And
Yes.
then the
I don't use the
warehouse
back.
access is off 534. Or the
The
mini
storage, yes, that's.
There is access there?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
I have an
I didn't
inside.
go around on the other side.
I
Okay.
have an inside gate to the storage units from my house.
Yes, ma'am.
But I don't use it for transporting, for moving vehicles. I just used to go in and collect my rents. So I can go down to the little office and collect the rent. That's the only time that property, that gate is used.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Give us a minute to read Mr. Nolan's letter. Don Nolan lives at 1201 Don K. Drive here in Kerrville. Submitted some comments that I'll go ahead and make public. Dr. Leslie is as good, Leslie Drive is as good as any street in Kerrville. This location is good for what is being proposed because there's heavy truck traffic on Leslie Drive already. I don't think that there will be a problem because Lowe's has heavy trucks coming and going all hour of the day and night. And I-10 with all the east-west traffic and semi-trucks with the engine brakes. Most of the properties on Leslie Drive are being used as commercial. I think that when it was decided that the future use for this area should be residential, someone had a hidden agenda. Those are his comments.
Okay, thank you.
So, anybody else like to speak before this?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paco Mondragon. I am the applicant for this project. And I wanted to, in hearing this, there were some things maybe I should approach first because it would have kind of calmed or answered some of the questions. This project has been a project that has been on the works for about a year and a half, 2 years. So to get to this point, not that we had made the application to the city, but just to be able to get everything lined up has taken that amount of time. So a lot of time and dedication has been brought here for this site. We have presented to the city a two-part project, as you can see on the site plan, phase 1 and phase 2. And when people say, I keep hearing the warehouse and distribution, I think everybody's mind might be, is it a Walmart distribution? No, it's a very small local facility that is being put in there for local distribution here in the Kerrville area. What's going to be there is product that gets distributed to the convenience stores of Kerrville. There's 2 drivers that are going to pick up product there that live in Kerrville. They're members of the community from Kerrville at this point. It's a food grade warehouse. And again, we call it warehouse, but it's a small area. It is, we're looking to build everything out of tilt wall construction. So you have all masonry, all concrete that blends in with the building of City Hall and what has been being built. If you look at the surroundings, it's something that will not only complement the area, it will create additional jobs, and it would be part of the tax roll at the same time. I think in some of the comments from city staff of the gateway, I've been, personally, I was chairman of the planning and zoning for the city of Eagle Pass for 5 years, so I've been in that chair. I've been part of planning. I enjoy planning. I'm getting my master's in land planning at the same time, so it is something that I inspire and have a heart for. And I think what happened when they applied the gateway was they said from this street to this street, and they just kind of mapped it out. And if I understand in the interpretation, I think we always have to ask ourselves, well, what is the interpretation of the gateway? In my opinion, was to control the beautification and the entrance and the businesses that everybody was seeing as they would come into town. This site, it's not on the main entrance to town. It's on the back part. If anything, Lowe's hides the site. From I-10, you can't see, it's not the corner property, there's already a commercial use in that property. So I think that over time, all communities change and adapt. Mixed use is something that we see significantly in San Antonio and Austin being applied. And our perspective and our goal here is to be able to bring two phases. Initially, when we barely got, I started coming to Kerrville, which I've been coming significantly, just asking people, because you learn a lot by asking the local residents what is needed, what is not needed. And phase one is something that is ready to move forward. We are behind schedule in the delivery of that project. Phase two, when we came here with the city and they said, well, retail, is it retail like you would see as a store? No. But we labeled it just to have a little bit of flexibility on what could go there. What we're seeing is that those buildings in other communities have worked for the trades, for the AC person that the wife is telling him to leave the house with all his AC units. He doesn't fit in the mini storages, and he needs a little bit larger room because he's already developed 3, 4, 5 years his business, and he wants a place so somebody could go and drop a set of plants at a small office, but then at the same time that you could get a pallet jack in behind the office and be able to store the AC unit. Or the electrical person that needs a place to not have all his conduit and wiring in his truck that suddenly gets stolen, or the tools. That's the niche that we are seeing, because we see that there's a big need, and Kerrville really has served as a corridor part of San Antonio as well for a lot of trades. So we see that there's a lot of people for that. The buildings are not big. They're approximately 5,000 square feet, so they're not big buildings. What we have seen, and probably in my last 3 visits, is that the housing aspect, specifically looking at apartments or single-family homes, affordable, that word I think has escaped the city of Kerrville. And there is, if you look at the site plan, the top part, it gives us the ability to look at and say, maybe we need to adapt that building so we can have either affordable housing or apartments or single-family homes that could target that area, the workforce, the people that are keeping Kerrville moving day in and day out. And so we do want to have that flexibility, and with the zoning change that we're requiring, it allows that. In reference to the neighbors, I think both any project that we bring, we like to make sure that there's adequate lighting. We have seen the Easy Street and how it's extremely dark at night. But with this project, automatically it would be not only lit up, but at this point it doesn't have, that whole area does not have sidewalks. We would not only implement the construction, but we would have the sidewalks as well in there. And so you start having some of the life and health issues come about, where you start having your sidewalks, you start having your pedestrian lights, in incorporating and being part of the community. In reference to phase one, and people say, well, is it a huge distribution? No, because it's only for local delivery of the Stripes convenience stores here in the city. There's 2 trucks, and there's one 18-wheeler that comes once a week. And the trucks that distribute are kind of like the U-Haul trucks that you would see. It's the small box truck that somebody would rent to move from an apartment or from a house at the same time. And so we're here to try to be able to complement the area. We believe that everything that is around us will help us, and we would help the area at the same time. I don't know if any of the board members might have a question that I might be able to answer or further clarify.
Well, I know, looking at the retail warehouse you're talking about, it's under 4,000 square feet, which is not large at all.
No. So again, it's not, sometimes the word warehouse or distribution, people might think, wow, there's 100 trucks. No, it's very small. If you look at just the size that is there, it's very, very small, because it's only for the city of Kerrville. the products that are to the convenience stores in the city of Kerrville, that's what's gonna go there.
Are you planning on fencing off the area?
Yes, the city has mentioned to us that in butting up to residential, so on both sides of the property, we do have to have our fencing. And we don't have any issue with that, along with the sidewalks on the other two corners, on Easy and Leslie. They didn't ask for the lighting, but we know that it's gonna be important to do the lighting. Part of the road, the way it is right now, based on the survey on Easy Street, actually is encroached into the property, so we would dedicate that area. Why pull up the asphalt? Might as well dedicate that area so that it could comply and mark it into a drivable driveway right now, because right now, part of that asphalt is inside of our property. So we would dedicate what is required so we could have our sidewalk there without any problems.
So you're thinking real fence, not vegetation fencing?
I think both. I mean, walking out there, I just came from the site again, and the time it has taken for a lot of those trees to grow, you can't just come in and chop them down.
No.
But, and I think the goal is gonna be you have your fence and you have your vegetation adjacent to it.
Is this the 3,700 square foot warehouse, is that gonna be, you're gonna own that and operate it?
Yes, sir.
It's your business?
Yes, it's
So
owned and
you're-
that is
this
correct.
Specific.
Yes.
This is a grade level warehouse, is that correct?
Yes.
No dock eye or anything?
You have your 2-foot dock just because that's like the U-Haul trucks that they have,
Right.
so you do have to have it. But yes, we operate it, maintain it, and own it.
So your second phase then is gonna be, since we don't have a code here, you get to use the phrase office warehouse. Is that, I'm sorry?
Office retail is how he has it marked.
We
I
label.
understand that, but I'm trying to get a definition on
Yes, sir.
what you see in your mind. In other words, you'll have an office in the front, and you'll be able to pull into the back, and the warehouse would be AC.
On behind it, on the back part. That way you kind of see the pretty stuff, and you could have the truck on the back just to offload, or the dolly to be able to.
And with a rolling door.
Is it
That or-
office warehouse?
Yeah, office warehouse, yeah.
You also alluded to workforce housing. Where would that go?
Right now, what we looked at on phase 2, the building at the very top, the 5,200, that one might be something that if we see that there's a bigger opportunity to have that workforce housing. We left the street, if you look at the parking ratio, we left a lot of parking. And so on the top part of the site, that's where we could incorporate like 1-bedroom apartments, where you see in other communities that we have applied them, they go like hotcakes. I mean, because it comes back to, it's not the fancy 10-foot ceilings. They just want something that is energy efficient, that is affordable, and that allows them to be able to be in the area and keep working.
Not Section 8 type?
No, sir,
Okay.
no.
Drew,
No,
let me
market
ask-
rate, you know.
Let me ask a question. Could low-density multi-family go there? You mentioned that earlier.
Currently under Gateway, yes, it can.
Okay.
It would be amendment to the draft ordinance that you have before you for the PDD, to add that. Mr. Mondragon and I talked about that just this afternoon as a possible amendment to phase 2. So it would be an amendment to your draft, but under the current gateway zoning, it would be allowed.
So you're proposing, Paco, just to build phase 1, that would be fenced in from the beginning?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and any future phase 2 would come,
That is correct.
be separate?
But this PDD would not allow
Okay.
it, correct, Drew?
Say that again?
This PDD would not allow residential.
The way it's drafted before you it would not allow it. So that would be an amendment as part of your motion if you wanted to include that. But the commission could make that addition
Yeah.
today.
PDD does not allow residential living, facilities, apartments, and so forth.
The way it's drafted that you have in your packet is not included, but you could include it.
But I'm talking about generally a planned development does not allow that?
It could.
It could.
Okay, I was thinking
Yeah,
about.
plan development's more specific design, master plan development, so
Okay.
it's all case by case.
Is there another way other than the PDD? I know we had that conversation when we annexed some property where we're gonna be locked into this, and then we're having a zoning review over the next year.
Correct.
And they would be locked into that, could not make any changes at
So-
that point.
One of the things we're looking at with the code rewrite is to try to incorporate some of the small 1 or 2 use PDs such as this and roll that into the new zoning code and zoning map. And therefore those PDs would be repealed, but the land use would still be allowed. With the current zoning code, the only way to pick up the warehouse and distribution is through the eastern districts. As you're familiar, the zoning code is broken up into geographic sections of the city. This being in the north portion of Kerrville, as far as the zoning code, we would have had to apply the east districts in the north area just to pick up the warehousing and distribution. So to honor the current zoning code, we felt that it'd be more appropriate to go with a PD rather than move an east district to the north side of town.
But in the future, that could be, the zoning could be changed to match this PD, and then the PD would go away. Is that what you're saying?
That's one of the possibilities that we're exploring with our consultants, yes.
And so it'd be grandfathered in
Well,
if the zoning did change, other than
Right.
to eliminate the PD.
we could either eliminate the PD and the property could potentially be grandfathered, or if the PD could not be incorporated into the new version, then the PD would remain, and the property surrounding it would have the new zoning designation. We've got a couple different routes to go with the new change. And again, we've got quite a number of PDs to look at to see how feasible that's gonna be. But the more PDs we can incorporate and repeal, the more consistent the zoning would become.
Yeah.
So that is the overall goal. It'll have to be looked at case by case, just like the original PD was established.
So to rephrase what you said, this whole piece is under consideration right now, 4-point-something acres. And in order for them to get a PDD that would allow for low-density multifamily like the apartments he was referencing, that would need to be an amendment to what we're looking at now.
That's correct.
Which would be added on, can be added on the motion, I mean, if we wanted it at this point, is that correct, or?
Right.
Which,
Comments for Baca?
Yeah, I'll go back to what your operation in the warehouse is going to be. What's gonna be delivering the product to your warehouse?
It's
I mean, is it gonna be 18-wheelers, or is it
118-wheeler, every week.
a week?
Mhm.
Okay. Then you offload, and then your smaller,
leaves it-
I mean, they offload, and then your smaller units distribute to Stripe stores here in the
That is correct.
Republic. Okay. So you're gonna get this building up and out of the ground, and then the other two will be your phase two,
That is correct.
one at a time, based on demand that you find?
That is correct.
Okay.
And we're seeing, again, that because of the last visits, 3-4 visits that I come in just different times, I think that hot button that everybody's saying comes back to housing. It points back to housing. We're part of a larger group that brings, has done apartments in Killeen, Eagle Pass, there's 250 units, Laredo, about 500 units. And so we think that, and again, talking to some of the neighbors, that they might say, well, you know, we would like maybe to sell our property at the same time. It might be something that we could look at, an apartment complex, a single one-bedrooms for whether it's a student, a teacher, workforce, but being able to bring in additional options to the city of Kerrville.
Okay. Do you have any, hard question, any concept at all what time frame you might be looking at for your phase two?
Our goal is to be able to get phase one as soon as possible, knowing that we're already behind schedule on that one. And right now, if we look at the apartments, we would just have to do a market study to be able to analyze what is the true requirement. I think you always have the shooting from the hip, kind of from talking to people. But if we look at that and maybe adding the adjacent landowner to also participate, that might be something that would benefit the project at the same time. But the answer to you is, I think the first project is going to take anywhere from 6 to 8 months, depending on weather and the dates that we're having. And then while we have the crews here, that's what ideally we need to jump to the next one, because the catalyst to start again, to turn that wheel just to start, it's the hardest part. So once they're here, we like to just continue into phase 2. So
Okay.
phase 2 would go in about 8 months. That would be the ideal.
Do you have this project, this type of project in Killeen or Eagle Pass or anywhere else?
We have in Eagle Pass, we did the Tractor Supply, which is not a
Right.
like this one, but we did the Tractor Supply store in 250 apartments. We done preferred development for
And it's on same, within range, I mean, same piece of property, Tractor Supply store and
You have
apartments?
2 of them. You have 2 of them. One of the things we did, for example, same concept in Eagle Pass. We have the Frito-Lay. We're a preferred developer for Frito-Lay. So the truck
Okay,
comes in.
yeah, all good people. I'm trying to get the concept of how far apart are the residents from warehouse, and that you market as a product. I find
They're
that-
in Eagle Pass. They're next to one another,
Okay. And it works.
We
and it works. Yeah.
not deal with the residential right now. I mean, it's not
No,
even part
no,
of it, so.
yeah.
Yep.
You
I mean, other than to say that-
Amend it though to make it permissible or within.
Well, or he has to come back
For another
later,
one.
which is really what I think the original plan was anyways.
That's correct. The
No.
commission could approve the draft before you today for just the retail, office, and warehouse and distribution. And Mr. Mondragon could come back with a amendment in the next 6 to 8 months for the multifamily if they decide to take that route. Or you can add that to the list today, and we would just have to work out updating the concept plan.
Well, but we're not approving just phase 1.
Correct,
We're
you are
approving the
approving.
whole site.
You are approving the whole site, that's correct.
I have a concern, Bruce. Is there, just looking at it, I cannot determine, is there a way to get more street access to this site than just Leslie Drive?
The site does have access on Easy Street.
Sure.
I'm just thinking if they do get into the workforce housing, they're gonna need another street in.
And
another
right now,
access.
just to not, we were talking to one of the neighbors where they abut the loop, and so maybe adding the parcel adjacent to it, then you have loop access at the same time, and at that point, it would really make sense.
Yeah.
Being able to pick the adjacent side to the left of us, because then at that point, it would give loop access, so then you have loop access, and then you have Leslie access at the same time. So for the way it is right now, we would have to update it, modify our site plan, as Drew was mentioning, if we would bring in the housing. And I don't have an issue while we're doing phase 1 and doing our study. If our study permits, then we would come back and say, can we do an update to the ordinance that would be passed? I don't have an issue with that.
Holden.
So looking at the site plan, this is the corner, actually the southwest corner of the property at Leslie and Easy Street, with the loop and I-10 to the bottom of the screen. So their primary access for the warehouse will be on Leslie Street. The office, as drawn here, has an access on Leslie Street and an access on Easy Street. And then what they're looking at it, if they do the multifamily, would be on this back portion of the property behind phase 1.
Okay.
Well, you can't see this at all from Sidney Baker. And from I-10 in the loop, you're already seeing commercial properties.
Right.
Any other questions y'all have?
So really, the only piece of this is the warehouse part that doesn't fit into the existing gateway, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Seems appropriate, I just don't like the PDD.
She wants to speak.
We still in public hearing?
I think Mrs. Older wants to speak again.
Okay, any other questions of Baca? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
James Kraft, 2783 Bandera Highway. I just had a couple of questions, clarification for me, and it's probably one that the developer would, or a couple that the developer would have to answer. One of them is the reason that this particular site is chosen for this development. Is it because it's your property, or, I mean?
We brought the client numerous times, and it made sense. They liked the fact that the highway was 2 blocks away, I-10 was there. And so they liked the access, the fact that
Okay.
you could enter almost in 4 different streets to this. That was one of the items that they looked at. And then knowing that it was gonna be a 2-phase development, then it was also important for us to have an area that would complement, and we could create a catalyst for growth for the other warehouse or business for the trades.
Okay, all right. The other item, delivery, access and egress to the warehouse portion of it is gonna be just off of Leslie Drive?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the access road that runs from Easy Street back around and over to Leslie Drive basically is just servicing the offices area or
Correct.
your low-income housing that you may be putting into that area,
Market
or the
rate
affordable housing, the market housing.
Right.
So you're not going to see trucks
No,
and
no, they don't. fit
semis
there.
and things
No,
like that
you don't
going
see
back
that.
there.
And again, it's 1 truck once a week. And then it's 2 trucks, the residents live in Kerrville right now. And so, they would be going to work there, parking their vehicle.
Gotcha.
And then taking basically a U-Haul truck and delivering to the local stores here.
Okay, and the last question may be yours as well as the city's, I'm not sure. But I didn't see anything in, just briefly reading through the document that went along with that indicated that there would be any kind of screening in between the existing residential, as for example up on the northeast portion of the property.
It's on the plan, and that was one of the first things that based on.
Something that blocks view
Correct.
from there and along Easy Street.
There's a requirement of screening, I guess, looking at the screen, the bottom part and not the top part of the site.
So the Easy Street, you're blocking that. You made a comment when you were mentioning this about the lighting and whatnot, that there would be lighting that would be put in that would add lighting that would help out on Easy Street and whatnot. But I noticed in the document that indicates there's not supposed to be any spillover lighting from the lighting that you put in into the street. It might be something that needs to be addressed. I don't know. I just happen to notice that into the document.
I mean, you look at.
I have no objection to that. Trust me on that, for lighting onto the streets, as long as lighting doesn't spill over into the existing residential areas, right? So you keep good night lighting in there, or dark sky lighting would be preferable, and I presume that you may be looking at that as well. Okay, great. You know, that's all the questions that I have.
Thank you
Thanks.
for your comments.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ms. Oldham?
May I ask another question?
Certainly.
Now, first of all, I went and got a copy of the site plan. I don't see anything on there about low-income housing.
No, I don't know where low-income housing.
Where you're talking about that right now. I mean, this
It was
is,
marketable housing.
you're not?
Market rate housing.
I'm sorry?
Market rate.
I don't care any kind of housing at this point in time. Have you've been up Easy Street, you know how wide it isn't. Only, 3 years ago, the city of Kerrville finally paved Easy Street. My husband and I had asked for years for it to be paved, and it wasn't. They paved it. There's no gutter, there's no curb, there's no sidewalk. But I was so thankful that it was finally paved. But it's a one-lane highway, roadway. It's not a two-lane roadway, and you're talking about bringing in housing and having them access the housing from Easy Street.
No, ma'am. What I mentioned, just to be clear, in talking to one of the neighbors, they have access to the loop.
No, they don't have access to the loop, actually. If you've seen back there, that drop from the loop is a good 10, 12 feet. And there is a water main or a water, my son Matt was here, he could tell you. There is a, water drainage
At
system
this
that
point,
comes
that's
from
not
under
the
the highway.
first part, that's gonna be on our phase 2 now. And again, it's not something that we might say will or will not happen. We have to make an analysis and a market study. At this point, what we present in the site plan, but what we have seen is that there is a need for certain housing. And it might not be the site for it. So I can't predict the future at this point, or what I can tell you is that based on the city's comments, the goal is to make sure that your privacy and your back wall is screened. I like all the vegetation that is back there, so our goal is to maintain
That
that.
vegetation is mine. The
Try to
majority of it.
maintain that
I-
as much as
If I were to stay there and you were to build all of this, I would hope that you would consider putting in not only a privacy, but a soundproof wall. I just wouldn't want all of that noise that would come from other apartments as well.
And again, at this point, we don't know, and that's not what's on the.
But my main concern is Easy Street and how those apartments would be accessed from Easy Street. Would Easy Street have to be widened?
Mrs. Olden,
Miss-
the apartments are not addressed in this PDD, it's not
I
included in
know
this.
they're not addressed in this meeting. Is that true,
But
John?
they would have to come back and
And-
go through the same process.
Right.
Go through the same, all right.
Yes.
All right, thank you, I
Oh,
apologize.
thank you.
It-
Valid questions?
And Chairman, just to clarify for the public, if they do come back to amend the PD in the future, you would still get notification of the meeting and public hearing.
I'm sorry.
If they do come back to amend this ordinance to add the apartments and multifamily, you would get notified again as an adjacent property owner. Okay, just making sure.
Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Olden. I live at 316 Bob White. Mary is my mother, and I grew up on the property next to this.
Okay.
So does the PDD, does that change the zoning use for everywhere that you guys had in the blue?
No.
No, just the site.
Just the site? Okay, so it doesn't affect the current
Correct.
zoning or uses? Okay,
Grab this real quick.
sure.
Yeah, the PD is requested for that solid red line.
Got it.
Just this parcel. This secondary red line around it is our 200-foot notification area,
Gotcha.
required by state law.
Got it.
So it is just this portion of the gateway, not the entire gateway.
Okay, so that doesn't affect, so on that, if I can use that, I guess. It's hard to use a mouse. This far away is really hard to use a mouse. So this line here is my mother's property on 2016. What kind of fencing would be required to go in there? And what type of lighting? And I heard about dark sky lighting a second ago. I remember vividly when Lowe's was built, they did the same thing. And I can assure you, halfway up the hill at Leslie Drive, the spillover that occurs on my mother's property occurs 24/7. They actually had to alter their property so that they cannot have darkness in their bedrooms at night. And so having this occur on two sides would obviously, be untenable for my mom. So my question would be, obviously not necessarily to the developer, but what would the city require to protect the citizens who are currently living there?
The screening requirement is a 6-foot privacy fence. The lighting should not spill over onto adjacent properties. And as you mentioned, with the varying elevation, sometimes that is difficult.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
that
this
would be-
property, her property is higher than Lowe's by probably 15, 18 feet,
Right,
and it makes no difference. I mean, her property is well lit.
okay. So that would be something we would address through the permitting, is making sure what type of lighting they're installing.
Sure.
Obviously, location and direction makes a significant difference on what they do. far
Yeah,
as
fair
lighting
enough.
and how it affects the adjacent properties.
And then my last question, and I'll leave you guys alone. So this change in zoning, if it were approved, does that affect the tax rates for the people in the area?
That's something with the appraisal district, and we don't have any say-so or authority over that.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you, sir.
And just to comment, I know it's been over, typically, street lighting is presented by the city, approved by the city and by the local electrical municipalities. And so it's not something that, we just saw that at night. I mean, it's pitch black out there, and so as a security, we would talk to the city and coordinate with that.
We would disagree, it's not pitch black on her property.
On Leslie Street.
All right, do we have anybody else who would like to speak during the public hearing? If not, I'll close the public hearing at 5:27. Comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, there's a fresh fish in this tank over here, and not a part of this group when we did the 2050 plan. Sometimes I'm a little behind, but I'm also the transportation nut out of this whole group. So I have a couple of questions. First, Paco, I'm sorry that you were chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission when I was city manager in Eagle Pass. I had big mancha as chairman. I understand where staff is coming from on their recommendation, and I support your position, but I also appreciate the comments that you've made and the indication of the flexibility that this body has a chance to address. Now, my transportation bug for the day is Leslie. I don't see, and this sort of relates to how that might relate to the gateway concept. There's very little chance you will ever see an off-ramp off of I-10 that would feed into Leslie, because terrain-wise, the topography out there is not going to let it. So Leslie is probably always going to feed off from the loop and from Sidney Baker. I envision Gateway would be best applied to that land development that would relate to the actual movement into and out of the community by both the local citizens and and those who come here to visit for some reason or other. I'm also very cautious about zoning changes, particularly when we're getting ready to do some investigation. My opinion is, on this particular case, is I don't see anything that I've heard today that I think that would not be in the long range, be in the good health for the development of the city of Kerrville. And so while I'm not a voting member of this board, I certainly at this point feel like that I have heard from both the neighbors and from the landowner that what we're talking about doing out there may change the whole future development concept for Leslie Street, particularly in that part of the street that's between Leslie and the Interstate 10 and the service road. I think my questions have very well been addressed. But again, I look at Leslie Street, and there's been some issues about traffic and traffic volume. I don't see what we're talking about doing today is going to generate a whole lot more traffic than probably what's out there already. And I go down Leslie 3 or 4 times a month. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Other comments, thoughts? If not, is there a motion?
Well, I'll take a shot at it. I move that we approve the plan as put forward for the phase one, and with acknowledgement that the phase two portion as presented would fall in the same purview, and that there is whatever language it takes to say that there is the acknowledgement at this point in time that there would be a possible consideration for residential. Or is that too much, or you have to do that in two steps?
Are you suggesting we approve only phase one and phase two would come back for a future case, essentially?
I think that might be a little
Well,
plainer.
I think we're charged with either approving the whole site
Or none at all.
as presented
Okay,
or not.
all right.
I think,
I said I would try.
okay.
So,
But
okay,
I think phase two is something, the developer, if they want to change their plan here, they'd come back.
okay, well, I think we want to, again, give you, Drew, the proper tool or proper platform, and that likewise acknowledge that you have come in good faith and said that this is a consideration, given your experience and background, and that you've had to present it this way, and that, we are in a flux situation awaiting new zoning direction and whatever. So, we start back, or Bob, you,
Okay, so you want to restate your motion?
yes, sir. So, I make a motion that we approve phase, the presentation as made by the applicant, and with the acknowledgement that any anticipated changes would be dealt with in a future hearing.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand.
Can I make a comment?
Yes,
before we vote? I was just gonna say, moving forward, Drew, obviously, the less PDDs we have in this period, the better. Because I think everyone's gonna complicate that process even more.
Yes.
So, and I guess, did you just not see any other way around this?
At this point, with the current zoning code, to honor the geographic districts that we have in place, that PD was the best that we could come up with at this time.
Okay.
To that effect, the code review committee so far has kind of given light to moving away from the geographical districts and more citywide districts that can be applied anywhere, so that we don't have an issue such as this. So we're not recommending a PD when really a base zoning district would apply.
This is probably, the gateway designation is probably a remaining part of the UDC that we experienced a few years ago. Was that not in the UDC program then?
I do not know. I'm not familiar with that part.
This has been Gateway for a while.
It had, that I do know.
Okay.
I do not know for sure if it was tied to the UDC proposal or not.
Thank you, I'm ready to vote.
Okay, all in favor of the motion and the second, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign, passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Taco. Okay, number 3B is another public hearing and consideration for action
Thank you, Chairman. This is a public hearing, consideration and action concerning two variance requests in accordance with Article 2, signs of the Code of Ordinances, City of Kerrville. The first being to allow a freestanding lighted sign. The second to allow a lighted sign to exceed the maximum size of 3 square feet by allowing the sign to be roughly 9 by 3 or 27 square feet. This is at 332 Clay Street, and the business is Pint and Plow Brewing Company. Here's a rough sketch of the sign itself. If you can see that site plan, the current sign is this red line on the corner. And they're proposing a similar location, moving back off the property line just a little bit to stay out of their parking lot. An elevated pole sign, which you can see the sketch right next to it.
Is that sign gonna be angled towards that corner?
It does show a little bit of an angle so that it's visible from both streets. Here's the actual sign itself. Again, this is about 9 foot by 3 foot. And here's some pictures of the intersection. And you can see in this photograph, there's the existing sign, and that's about 5 feet tall currently. Roughly 5 feet tall. They are looking at a taller sign that'll be on a pole, so arguably improving the visibility on that corner because it'll be elevated out of your line of sight for vehicles on the roadway.
Now, what's the current ordinance for height of signs?
You'd ask off the top of my head, I'm not positive. It does meet the height requirement.
It does? Okay.
Yes. So the variance is just for the allowance of the lighted sign and the area.
So a lighted sign is not allowed in that area,
In the central business district, it is not.
but the neighboring properties have lighted signs.
Yes, they do.
And we have some like neon signs
Right.
in there as well.
Going back to the code review committee, one of their later tasks throughout their project is to look at the sign code and see what updates have come since the last time the sign code was addressed. I can imagine, given the technology and the different ideas for downtown, that may be something that the code review committee is going to look at.
Well, I think raising that sign makes sense with the traffic study.
I hate monument signs, they just block.
I don't
traffic.
like blind corners like
I
that.
don't either.
Right. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions before or after the public hearing.
Okay, let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Open the public hearing at 5:39. Anybody wishing to make a statement to this commission, please approach the podium. State your name and address, please.
Can we get Jeremy's PowerPoint up real quick? Thank you.
No, thank you.
Jeremy Walther, 332 Clay Street. I'm the owner of the business and the property. There's only 5 slides in this, and a lot of them are redundant. I don't even think they're quite necessary, but we can blaze through them. So I really just want to make sure it's clear what we're intending to do here. This is our existing sign. It is a traffic hazard as it is. It was always intended to be temporary. We ran out of money during renovations, and so we paid $100 for that vinyl sign. 3 years later, it's starting to crack, and we have raised the money to invest in a proper sign. Sorry, I'll go back. So we also feel it's a poor representation of our business. We are working hard to develop a brand as a brewery. That's incredibly important in that industry, not only for local market, for a market beyond Kerrville. And most of our market, 95% of the beer that we brew is sold in Kerrville, but we do have at this moment 8 outside accounts. We have 4 accounts in West Texas. We have 2 accounts in Austin, 2 accounts in Fredericksburg, and 2 accounts in New Braunfels. And the reason we have those accounts is to essentially advertise Kerrville. And so if you walk into those places and you see a tap handle that says there's a brewing company in Kerrville, perhaps that will inspire someone to make the drive. And so we feel like if we're going to take more or less that responsibility to attract people to our place and to Kerrville, we want to make sure that every part of our brand represents who we are, not only our business, but also our role in the community. And so having a custom-built sign that is more representative of our brand, more representative of that very unique culture that is existing and developing along Clay Street, we feel like this would be a benefit not only to us but to the businesses that are surrounding us as well. And so we don't see any negative impact. These are photos of the signs that are currently around us. I will also say, just to kind of be good neighbors, we voluntarily extended that fire lane that's along Jefferson because people were parking pretty close to the corner of Clay and Jefferson, and that also was a traffic hazard, and we don't want to create hazards, and so we voluntarily extended that and sacrificed some parking. That's also part of the goal of raising up this sign. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
My only question is, you've got hours and closed Tuesday, which I think is unique, but are you gonna still have those signs somewhere on this sign?
That just came up because today's Thursday and we're closed on Tuesdays, and we're usually around on Tuesdays, and every Tuesday somebody will come up and knock on the door and say, your sign is really confusing because it says open 7:30 to 9 p.m., closed Tuesdays, and I thought it said open. So that's all going away.
Okay.
And we're going to figure something out to make that a little clearer for people. Thank you for pointing that out.
I like the idea of being open on Tuesday. Any comments?
Just a question, the only illumination is the neon, right?
Correct. And currently our small parking lot is fairly dark, and so we felt that was a kind of a subtle benefit. The light of the neon will offer some illumination to the parking lot.
I like the sun.
Yeah, like the ostrich.
The fabricators had, this is a very small outfit outside of San Marcos in a very small, used to be a barn. They've retrofitted it into their workshop, but they had some old drop pieces of steel and an antique saw blade behind their shop when I visited them, and we went back there and we were digging through the scraps, and he said, man, it would be pretty neat to use that saw blade and implement it into the sign. Maybe that's the part that the ostrich and the farmer are about to plow under. And I thought he was crazy, and then he kind of drew it up and then ended up working it in, and I thought it was a pretty great reuse of it.
It ties in with your name very well.
Sure.
Any other questions to Jeremy? Anybody else to speak before the public hearing? If not, we'll close the public hearing at 5:44. Comments from the staff and commissioners. If hearing none, I'll accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the variances as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign, passes 5-0. Thank you. Staff report.
I'm currently working with our code review committee, our consultant, Kimley Horn, the same consultants that worked on the Kerrville 2050 plan, going through several of the administrative sections of our code, make sure that we're spelling our process out much more clearly for developers and contractors. Moving it from there, we're going into drafting some of the land use lists to present to the code review committee, and starting looking at the layout of the zoning districts. Not sure how familiar with different codes across the state. Some codes are very table heavy, some codes are very word heavy. We're kind of trying to hit somewhere in the middle where we've got some tables where it makes sense to explain our regulations by a table. More paragraph and list language where it makes sense. Trying to simplify as much as we can so that we're not.
It's like a matrix, maybe.
Right. So some combination thereof is what we're looking at as far as format. Plan to have the draft before the code review committee early February at this point. And moving on through planning commission, of course, through a tentatively scheduled a joint council and planning and zoning commission meeting in February or March? March. So our March work session will likely be a joint council and planning and zoning commission meeting here. Planning an open house between then to present the draft code, and then going back to the code review committee before it goes to city council.
That's a good idea.
So that gets us in through probably the end of April as far as that process. We also have, not related directly with this board, but we have the food ordinance that we're reviewing to update to the state food establishment rules and to incorporate or update and reincorporate our food truck ordinance. Kerrville, I think, was way ahead of the curve for many cities of the state and had a food truck ordinance in place, I believe, 2009, 2010, somewhere around there. That industry has changed. How cities treat the industry has changed. So we're going through an update there, hopefully to more easily facilitate more food trucks. Try and get some of our barriers out of the way.
I think that's a good market here, yeah.
I certainly don't expect a mad rush of food trucks coming in, but we do have
You've got a few already. That
about half a dozen that operate pretty regularly in Kerrville for special events, and they have a few contracted places that they work out of. We've got a few more surrounding Kerrville, whether it's just in the county or adjacent cities that operate. We've been including them in this process so that they're kind of giving their feedback and input. But that's moving forward to council ideally at the end of January.
Now, they work well in Austin.
They do. Yeah, and I've seen
there
them.
could be too many, but I think there could allow some.
And so we're trying to find that Kerrville balance, what fits here, location, and so on. So, what a mess. That's it. Oh, we're also working on updating our building codes.
Do what?
Through the building codes, through the Building Board of Adjustment and Appeals. Fire marshal's office and building official are kind of sharing notes and making sure they're on the same page, but that'll be going back to the BBAA probably in January, then on to council from there. And I do have one more thing. We had our kickoff meeting with our software company. We've partnered through an interlocal agreement with the South Central Planning and Development Commission in Louisiana. So they're a multi-parish development commission following the aftermath of Katrina. They were having issues tracking all of their permitting through multiple parishes or multiple counties. And so they developed a software for themselves to use internally. And then the commission eventually approved to work nationwide and basically sell this software. So we had our kickoff meeting this afternoon. We'd run that through the development stakeholder group that we've kind of put together to get some feedback. One of their big takeaways was they would like better access to our process, particularly through plan review. So a lot of our cases through development services, whether it be a planning case, building permit, health code, or code enforcement case, will all be housed in this new software. So we should, hoping to start implementation in kind of our go live in May and June, and then phase through each different module of that. But they're currently contracted through 15 states and hundreds of jurisdictions. There's a handful of cities in Texas that use this software.
Well, makes sense to standardize stuff like that.
And so it'll give the outside customers access online from your smartphone, computer, to apply for permits, review your permit, keep up with inspections, and so on. So
Do we have any more meetings this month?
we do not.
Okay.
This is it for December. So have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other business? If not, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, I have a second.
Second.
Second, all in favor? We're adjourned, thank you.